Johnson, my brother. We used to be twins. I want to thank each and every one of you for being here, and Sonia for inviting me, because, you know, if you notice, this day sort of slipped up on everybody. There was no press, there was a lot of fanfare about it. And so as a result, I think people it slid through the cracks. There's so much stuff going on now with the virus, with the politics, with the people, that it's very easy to overlook something. But this must not be overlooked. My job is to be a bridge. In 1963, I was a junior at Columbia University. I've been part of a real program to find blacks in the South to come to Ivy League schools. And let me tell you something, it was no fun. It was 35 years before I ever went back after I finished, because in that year we had about 700 students. There were 2 African Americans, and both of us were scared. And so when the March on Washington came about, there was a lot of controversy. My mother, and you know, your mother tells you what to do. John Lewis told him, his mother said, boy, don't go get in no trouble. That must have been the speech of every black mother in America. Because my mother called me, and you know, in those days when somebody called you, that's serious. I mean, you got to go downstairs to get the phone to answer it. And so when your mother tells you don't go, it's clear. And there were many reasons why we didn't go. And the main one was really just fear. People were afraid that there would be a riot. See, in those days, they didn't have the tanks and the stuff they have now. They had plain old dogs and water hoses and mean people with billy clubs. They didn't even have those shields that they put up. They just waited out and hit you in your head. And so that was the environment in which it was taking place. And so we were all afraid, and nobody had ever seen anything that big. Jojo McNeil, one of the Greensboro 4, was one of my classmates. And when they went up to do the sit-in, it was clear they had to overcome fear. And so at that time, the fear was that we'd get down there and the dogs and the water hose, and with all of those people, nobody really had a concept of what 250,000 people looked like. And so when we got there, and let me tell you folks, I really salute what you're doing, because there are a lot of people that should have been here that are not here. There were probably a lot of people that were scared to come out. But it was the same day then. It's amazing. If I'm a bridge between the past and the present, it's the same thing going on a different side. And so we couldn't, you know, hop a bus and go. We finally actually hitchhiked the ride. And many of you young people might not know what that is. When you hitchhike, you get out on the road and put your leg out and hold your hand out. We caught a ride with an African student who wanted to be there. And so for our young people, there are moments in history that you have to be there. You can't read about it. If I had not been there, I couldn't stand here and tell you how it really felt. I could tell you what I read about it, but I couldn't tell you how it really felt. And so when we rolled into Washington early that morning, the first thing that really impressed us was there were buses as far as you could see. And the first bus, and by the way, we didn't think about food. We didn't take any food with us. All we wanted to do was get there. When we got there, the first bus I saw was a bus that had a big sign saying Wilmington, North Carolina. And I had a friend, Arnold Robinson. He's gone on to meet glory. But Arnold was born the same day I was, and when he got off that bus, he had 2 very important things. He had a suit and he had a briefcase. Because his mama told him to look like you don't belong. If you go into a march, you bring a suit and a briefcase so you can slide off in the corner if something goes down. That's what she told him. But in that briefcase, he had chicken sandwiches. And that made all the difference. But that just set us up. The feeling inside of seeing buses as far as you could see made you know that this was something special, made you know that this was a moment you had to be there. And when the people started marching, you know, the press can get you so conditioned to what you think is going to happen. You know, I mean, they had pictures of whether the dogs were going to bite 4 or 5 of us, or whether there would be hundreds of people hurt and killed and maimed. Not a soul. It's like everybody was singing from the same playbook. They were walking along singing, "We shall overcome," singing those songs of freedom. And when we got to the march, when we got to the open field there, where the speakers were sharing their message, it's funny, they always put the good guys at the end. There were a number of people before Dr. King, but when he came out and he started speaking, it was as though a pin had dropped. Now, they didn't have a sophisticated sound system like this. You know, I can't even remember seeing the speakers. I know they had them, but it didn't matter because everybody was so tuned in, so attentive to what was going on, that even their heartbeats were quiet. When we heard his words, have you ever felt like crying inside? And feel that feeling inside that makes your heart beat, makes you want to get up and do better and do more. And that's how we felt. That's how we felt when people, and you know, you never see anything about the news about any bad thing that went down. Because it didn't. People came, they demonstrated, they got on their buses, and they went back home. The one thing that I didn't understand at the time, but I do now that I see us here. I was very tired, and I told you we hitchhiked, and the fellow who went with me disappeared, and I was trying to figure out how I was going to get back to school, and I laid down on a bench out there in the park near the monuments and fell asleep. Those who know me know I can fall asleep anywhere. And when I fell asleep, I woke up, and all the trash had been cleared away. All the people were gone, and it was as though it never was. And so now we're here. And in many instances, it is though it never was. But we have a big, important job to do because we are the soul of this country. We're the heartbeat. We're the music. We're everything that's good about America. And American could be off on a wrong train, but the one thing the civil rights movement taught us, and Dr. King and John Lewis, is that it takes white people, black people, brown people, green people, and any other kind of people that come along who believe in truth and justice. So give yourselves a hand.
Yay!
So at this moment in time and space, as we begin to go forward, I wrote a book called Solving the Race Issue in America, and I wrote it because it was important that we solve it. So many times when we look at the news, and you all are demonstrated and many of you all were arrested, but many times you hear on the news about the rioting and people, whatever you focus on grows. If you want to focus on the rioting, you focus on it. If you want to focus on the problem, and that's what's happening. Many times it's like, can you imagine a man who's been shot, who's been cut, who's bleeding, and when the people see him, the only complaint they have is, wow, he's bleeding all over the streets. There's blood everywhere. I can't support that because he's bleeding on the sheets. He's bleeding on the kids. It's in our hands that we have to do 3 things. Number 1, we got to make sure to revisit this history. Many of us are old enough to have been around to see some of this, but many of our young people haven't seen it yet. And so we need to revisit the history so that they'll really know what's going on. Number 2, we got to recognize what does not work. The laws, the politicians, definitely. They help, but it doesn't work. But number 3, we have to realize that this is a spiritual issue. That until we change the hearts and minds of the people in this country, we're going to be here 50 years again, doing the same things for the same causes. So I'm going to close with a poem from the end of our book, and it says this, and the poem is called And So America. And it says, when the rains of truth fall upon your naked body, and the flood of tears of 1,000,000 captive souls comes upon your barren shores. And the winds of justice and equality beat upon all that you have created. Will America stand before the eternal judge as a testament to the glory of man's humanity to man? Or will America fall as yet another broken promise that men offer up to their gods? The answer, America, is not in our stars, but in ourselves. Give yourselves a hand to being soldiers on the battlefield of truth, the battlefield of justice, the battlefield of righteousness, and most of all, the battlefield of change. Thank you.
All right. Come on, let's give another hand. Brother Harris, thank you so much. Very good, very good. Ever have a little shoemaker?